Hello and welcome to the Pages of Ink podcast, the podcast where we explore all things books, stories, authors, and the world of reading. I'm your host, Angelica Garcia, and as always, we are here at Streetside Studio 7 in Alexandria, Minnesota. I have a super special guest today, Brian J. Dunn, a storyteller whose essay truly touched my heart. But rather than read off a bio, Brian, could you tell the Pages of Ink viewers a little bit about yourself and what brought you to the podcast today?
Sure. I think it's a very serendipitous story. I worked for Best Buy for nearly 30 years.
Wowie.
Yeah, I lived in Boston, Ohio, and most of the years in Minneapolis. And I found a lake home here in 2016, and I fell in love with Alexandria. I'm not going to take you all the way back, but my point is, I've been trying to write a book for about 7 or 8 years since my wife passed away in 2016, and I've just been stuck. One day I came in here, and I think I talked to your aunt and you about the studio that you were building. Yeah. And all of a sudden, it all clicked for me that I wanted to tell these stories. Writing wasn't working because I'm the kind of writer that hates everything I write.
Yeah, I feel that.
Do you?
Yeah,
Do you?
Yeah. You're your biggest critic, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, I got involved and launched my podcast here, the most important podcast ever. And you and I talk about books all the time.
Almost every weekend. Yep.
So it just felt like a real natural fit.
Well, good. That's awesome. So again, you sent me an essay, and I will put some snippets of it on the screen. But in your essay, you mentioned books were an escape hatch from a heavy childhood. Do you remember the first book that gave you that refuge?
The first one that really I dove into, and I had all the kids' books. I had dinosaur books. I had all that stuff. But the real novel that took me somewhere and moved me was Tolkien's Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yeah.
And that was really transformative. I read The Hobbit first, and then I just was in the Shire. I was in that world, and the metaphors all connected so readily for me that it really awoke something in me.
Yeah, do you remember what age? And was it for school you had to read those, or was it
a
choice?
It was, I've always been a little authority resistant. I've always enjoyed reading things more for myself than as an assignment.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a choice, and a English teacher, a nun actually, said you might find this interesting.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, it was.
Wow. How did reading offer you something that the world around you couldn't at the time?
There were some tough times in my house. My parents' relationship was very rocky. My dad split when I was 14. So it's real easy for your world to start to feel small.
Yep, just shrinking and closing in on
Yes, totally. And nobody out there is going to understand all this craziness that's going on in here. And what I really found in the books, as soon as I started reading, the world became gigantic.
Yeah.
Gigantic. And anything was possible. If I was willing to imagine it, it was possible.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I love that. You said that you went to work at full-time at age 14.
Yeah.
How did reading become your self-guided education, and what did it teach you that perhaps school wasn't?
And it's a really good question, because my sons would all tell you, I have 3 sons, and they will all tell you that I was fanatical about them getting good education.
Oh yeah? Wowie, cool.
I was.
Good.
And it was just a matter of need that I went to work. And something had to give, and school kind of gave.
Yeah.
And I just started accelerating my reading every spare moment, reading is an inexpensive hobby, and it is a way to travel the world in 45-minute increments.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so as I started to hear about things, political things, geographical things, science, I just start reading. I spent hours in the library.
Wow. Oh, I love the library. It just feels like I'm at home.
Do you still go?
Here in just a block over almost, it seems like. And then back home in Grand Forks, I would go to both that we had in town.
I haven't been in a library in a long time.
Oh, wow.
What's it like today?
This one has had some changes from when I was a child, going there really little with my brothers and mom for story hour and such. Lots of computers and spaces for people to sit with their books or bring their study materials in.
I got you. So the technology's been embraced.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. Now I'm thinking about the library and how I want to go.
I know. And look at me. You can tell we both have pods.
Yeah.
Because now I'm asking you all these questions.
Yeah. Who are a couple of your favorite authors, and what did those authors teach you about life or yourself?
So I always hesitate when people ask me what my favorite authors are because what kind of mood am I in?
Yeah,
what am I interested in?
Yep. Yeah.
Which is the wonderful thing about it. But a couple for sure. I'm obsessed with Charles Dickens. Absolutely obsessed with Charles Dickens. In fact, every year I reread The Christmas Carol, and then every day I sort of chunk it out. I write a synopsis essay each morning, and I find it so energizing. The thing I love about that book, novella actually, is that every time I read it, it's a little different, something a little different catches my eye.
That's awesome.
Which is something I love to do with C.S. Lewis and Tolkien. It seems like these authors that craft these amazing worlds and transport us there, there's something different you can look at in every room you go into.
Yeah, with C.S. Lewis books, it seems like the golden nuggets I get every time I reread the books, they're there when I really need them.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's really well put. And I find I keep a list on my phones of quotes, and there's a lot of C.S. Lewis quotes.
Yeah.
And I took an online course about the life of C.S. Lewis.
Oh, wow.
He and Tolkien were very good friends, and they were very good friends with Winston Churchill, who was probably the most influential person of the 20th century.
I didn't know that. That's really cool. Even that the two authors were friends.
Yeah.
How interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. What makes a story stick with you long after you've read it or heard it?
You know what's really interesting about that? If the story resonates with me, I don't know if I can tell you exactly why a story resonates with me. I have some ideas. But if it does, it pops up into my head at just the right moment, sort of just in time, and gives me counsel, gives me a laugh about the absurd circumstances we find ourselves in sometime.
Yeah.
But the story has to, for it really to stick inside my soul, it has to resonate with a truth, with the author's truth, with the character's truth. I don't have to agree with the author, but if they're being sincere about what they think, I find that it stays with me.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really good. How has your relationship with reading evolved over time?
That's really interesting to me because I became a tablet reader for a long time. I loved the idea of, hey, I can click on a word, because I still read books and go, what does that word mean? Or what's the context that they're using? And that's how you spell that. And I can dive down all kinds of rabbit holes on that. I love that. But I have to tell you, Angelica, one of my favorite things to do in the whole world, and you've seen me do it here, is walk through a bookstore and bookshelves. I love how you've curated what you have
so
here.
much.
I really
Thank
do.
you.
In fact, I've picked up a couple of books here that I've really enjoyed.
Good.
But it's a place where I'm able to clear my head. I love the smell of a bookstore.
Yes.
I love the feeling of a book. So I've gone from tablet back to holding the book in my hands.
Good. I just recently started tablet, like a Kindle.
Yeah.
I got one for my birthday, and I had it in the hospital while I was there, so it kind of got me
Through a
into
tough time.
that, and just reading on the tablet, but I do miss holding. There's nothing better than the feeling of holding a book.
I agree, but when I travel, I love I'm always reading 4 or 5 books.
Yeah,
okay?
wow.
Yeah.
At a time.
Yeah, but sometimes I'll let one sit for 4 months before I pick it back up. I love that I can carry them all with me in a tablet.
In one, yep.
I really like that.
They get heavy very fast.
They
books.
do.
My goodness.
They do.
Is there a book that you received or read at different stages of your life that meant something different each time? One particular book that stands out?
I have to tell you, and I don't mean to be redundant, but Christmas Carol is certainly that story for me because at different ages in my life, I sort of have identified with different characters.
Yeah, that's cool.
And the same with the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which I've read several times. I love The Godfather.
Yeah.
I've read that book several times. So it's really... There's many books that resonate with me that I love to go back and read. I don't know about you, but I go through phases too, where a couple of years ago I was deep into biographies. Deep into biographies. Yeah. And then when I read a biography that somebody's written, an unauthorized one, then I look for the autobiography, then I look for different perspectives because the truth can be a moving target sometimes.
Yeah, that would be interesting to read a bunch of autobiographies, but from the different perspectives. I've never thought about doing that.
I did that. I knew Steve Jobs. I did some business with Steve Jobs. So there were a number of books because everybody's looking to make a dollar, right? So it was very interesting to sort of triangulate the stories with the experiences I'd had firsthand, and that it's an interesting exercise.
I'm sure.
There's some gaps.
I'm sure.
There's some gaps.
So how does music and movies serve the same emotional or educational purposes as books for you?
So when I was young and things were kind of tough, one of the things that happens, as we said earlier, your world gets small.
Yeah.
And books helped broaden my mind. I feel like music really helped me feel connected in an emotional way that resonated with me, that somebody out there got it. And I'll always be grateful to Bruce Springsteen because listening to his music, I said, hey, he gets me. That's good. Yeah. And maybe he doesn't get me so much today, but that's okay. You know, that's okay. There's seasons for all of it. But I really think the musicians are today's poets.
Yes. Oh, for sure.
I think the people that are writing great music are today's. Bob Dylan and one of my sons and I always argue about this. Bob Dylan is maybe one of the greatest poets of our time.
I would agree. Like, you could just take all of his lyrics, put it in a book, and it would be poetry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So in your essay, you mentioned Springsteen, Bob Dylan, U2, and the Eagles. What do all those artists represent to you?
That's interesting. And I could have listed 100 of them.
Yeah.
I really could have. But I was trying to get across just the power of the lyrics and the power of music. They all mean something a little different. Bruce's music was very... it was connective tissue for me when I was young.
Yeah.
The Eagles have traveled very well with me for my whole life. And as I said in the essay, whenever I can go see them, one of my sons lives in Houston, so I took him and his girlfriend to go see the Eagles.
So cool.
I went to the Sphere in Las Vegas, did the same thing. Wherever the Eagles are, I like to bring people I love to those shows to see how it resonates for them, because it really resonates powerfully for me.
That's awesome. In addition to music, you mentioned movies like Dead Poets Society, Field of Dreams, To Kill a Mockingbird. How have those films guided your values throughout your life?
That's really interesting frame for it. I don't I think the book that's guided my values the most is the Bible.
Yeah, yeah.
But all of those books, I beg your pardon, all those films have been sort of signs along the highway that I'm going down the right road.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
And it just sort of, and I'm the kind of person that likes to have their emotions exercised. And if I'm going to watch a film and it's good, I'm willing to give emotional bank to it.
Yeah, right.
Right. And my relationship with my father was very, very strained and difficult, and basically ended when he left when I was 13 or 13. So Field of Dreams resonated with me because the whole storyline is about what was and wasn't between a son and his father.
Yeah.
And I always think, I mourn for what could have been with my father, not what was.
Yes.
And that accessed that for me in a way that was meaningful.
Does the looking at it on the mourning what could have been and not what was, does that help you?
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And I think it's and it does because no parent ever starts off thinking, you know what, I'm going to be crummy to my kids.
Right.
It's just not how we're wired. So something went wrong somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think it's okay. I mourn my mom because I talk to my mom like every day of my life but 5.
Yeah.
And we used to talk about books and go on and on and on and about it. So it's different. One size doesn't fit all when you're grieving people you love.
Yeah, I like that. One size doesn't fit all.
And the idea of moving, and this is a whole nother pod probably, but the idea of, I don't think we move on from grief. I think we move forward.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And we move forward and we take with us what's precious from the people we're grieving.
Yeah. In your essay, you wrote that Dickens taught you about the extraordinary nature of the ordinary man. How has that influenced your work, especially your own podcast?
I think that is primarily what my podcast is all about.
Yeah.
And if Dickens were alive today, he'd probably sue me because I'm totally taking, as he walked through, the heroes in that book were all completely sort of nondescript, just ordinary people with ordinary struggles. How are we going to have enough money for the Christmas goose? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? And it really has inspired in many ways the work I'm doing now, which I'm absolutely loving.
Yeah, it's
Just
so
loving.
fun to watch you do your podcast here and all the amazing stories that you get to share with the world through your podcast.
And do you know what's the stone cold truth about that, Angelica? Some of these stories, there's so many of them that I've had the privilege of coming across. I get to sort of relive them again through these guests, and I've been sort of overwhelmed by how generous and honest our guests have been with sharing really difficult stuff.
For sure. Yeah, there's some heavy ones that you have, but there's a golden nugget or 2 or 3 in each episode, so they're very enjoyable.
And please tune in because they're not all going to be heavy.
No,
they're not all going to be heavy.
Not all heavy, but all amazing. And I will leave the link for Brian's podcast and his Instagram, Facebook down in the description as well. How do you think your younger self would feel knowing where your love of books and stories has brought you today?
That is a very good question. My younger self would not be able to believe where it's taken us.
Yeah.
I look back on my life, it's like it happened to somebody else.
Wow. Yeah.
So, yeah. And as I'm revisiting these stories, and I'm not pitching the pod, but as I'm revisiting these stories, it sort of illuminates the hallways where all those stories happened. And it's been really so energizing for me
Yeah.
So
I'm sure that's awesome. That's awesome. Can you talk a little bit about how your love for film and music has carried you into now having a seat at the table of the American Film Institute and Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
yeah, those were two really cool
That's
things.
so cool.
That I got
That's
to
so
do.
cool.
I actually got to vote for people to get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I had a vote. It was on behalf of all the great customers and employees I represented because we sold so much music back when music was not streaming, when
Right.
it was a...
DVDs
Yep.
or CDs. I have a whole collection still.
I have collections of cassette tapes. I don't have a record collection anymore, and I'm kicking myself about that.
Yeah.
But I have thousands of CDs. But having the chance to do that and be engaged in going from the 14-year-old kid listening to Bruce, or on a bad day listening to the Doors. It's real dark.
Yeah, I know the Doors too. Yeah.
I love the Doors, but that was definitely rainy day stuff.
Yes.
You know, we're going to visit Pity City today, so let's crank it up. But it was so much fun to be involved with that. And the American Film Institute really taught me the science and art of telling a story and the power of a narrative. And I think there is nothing more powerful than a story that puts forward a point. And I really got to see that firsthand by some of the best in the world, and that was
How
very
cool. That's awesome that you got
Very
to
cool.
experience that. That's amazing. What would you say to someone going through a hard time who hasn't yet discovered the escape hatch that reading can offer?
I would say this to somebody going through a tough passage. If you have an inkling, if reading can hold your attention, grab it. I'm not saying reading is the only way. For me, it was the best way.
Yeah.
But people have to have hope. And there's always something there, but you have to look for it.
Yes.
You have to look for it. And I think reading, for many, is one of the best avenues for that. And it takes a lot for the author to sit down and pen his or her thoughts and go through the self-loathing we both know is part of it and fight through it. So if they cared enough to tell us this story, I feel like engaging with it is the least I can do.
Yeah, that's similar to what my mom says too. Now we're on our last question already. What a joy this has been,
Oh my gosh.
What is one book or even one quote that you return to again and again? Whether it's reading that quote or book or just even thinking it in your head.
Okay. I have three things that I'm going to answer this with, okay? The first one is one of the things I think about all the time. When I was 14, my mom gave me the book Jaws by Peter Benchley. And I know it became this big sensational movie. The book is magnificent.
Yeah.
And different than the movie a little bit, but magnificent. And there's a line in it, and it's the famous line from the movie, where Roy Scheider's character looks and sees the shark and says, "We're going to need a bigger boat."
Yeah.
And I always think about that when there's a big problem, because there's always a bigger boat.
Yeah.
But I think there's strength in identifying, you know what, we're going to need some help with this one, and that's okay. The second thing I want to mention, I read the book The Exorcist, and it was like a month of no sleep.
Yeah.
And I got in trouble at school from Sister Mary Elaine
Oh.
because I was reading it behind my book during reading hour. And she whacked the back of my leg with the ruler 7 times.
Oofda.
And then sent me down to the principal's office. And Sister Mary Xavier was the principal. And I thought she was going to just rail on me. And she said, "How far are you in the book?" And I told her. And she said, "I read it." And she started talking about this and that. And she said, "I'd love it if you stopped by after school, until you're done with the book, my office, and we'll take 10 minutes and talk about the book, which we did.
Wow.
Which we did.
Wow.
And it was just incredible. I think about her frequently, and not that she needs my prayers, but she's always on my prayer list. She's a lovely person.
That's awesome.
And she was a game changer for me. And as far as a specific quote, there's so many, but there's one by Dickens, and I'm sure I'll butcher it, but I think about it all the time. And it has to do with my wife's battle with cancer, and when she passed away, I obviously was heartbroken, and my sons and I were heartbroken. And there's a Dickens quote that says, "I was better after I wept, more sincere, more interested." I'm sure I'll get it wrong, but I'm going to send you the actual quote.
That's amazing.
And it's something I think about all the time. I was better after I wept. And I think I embrace emotion. I don't try to constrain it because I don't think that's real. It's going to show up somewhere.
Yeah. I really like that. And I can look at that two different ways. Like, I'm better after I wept. So I'm better after going through this hard thing. But even just the release of crying sometimes.
Yep. More sincere, more honest. In fact, I want to look it up and read it for you. Can I do that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Please do.
All right. So, Angelica, here's the quote that is probably the most meaningful in my life, and I think about it often. I'm going to read it to you. "Heaven knows we need never be ashamed of our tears, for they are rain upon the blinding dust of earth, overlying our hard hearts. I was better after I had cried than before, more sorry, more aware of my own ingratitude, and more gentle."
I have chills.
It's absolutely a powerful quote.
That is. That was by Dickens, you said?
Yes.
My gosh.
Yes.
Very, very good. Well, Brian, the episode is coming to a close.
Can I say something before you send me on my way?
Yeah.
I love what you're doing here.
Thank you.
I love that you're curating a bookstore here. I love that you're taking your passion for it all and sharing it with the world through this podcast.
Thank you very much.
And I don't miss an episode, and I recommend that all of you watch every one.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor to have you on the Pages of Ink podcast. I've been looking forward to it since probably last year when this was being built, I think. So thank you so much for sharing your story, your essay, and your love of reading with the Pages of Ink viewers.
Thank you, Angelica.
Thank you, everyone, for watching episode 4 of the Pages of Ink podcast. If you enjoyed, please give this episode a thumbs up and subscribe. As always, happy reading. I'll see you next time. And remember, every book has a second chance to inspire. We're good.
That was awesome.